Warning, the following video will contain minor spoilers for the newly released game. If you don't want to hear parts of the story, monsters, or whatever, you might want to play the game first. But hey, don't say I didn't warn you. Hey everyone, Jude here, and welcome to another Thoughts with Jude. For those of you who don't know, I love Monster Hunter. And I mean, I really love Monster Hunter. I started playing these games with Monster Hunter World, played Iceborne, loved Rise, and adored Sunbreak. And I often wondered what a new next-gen game would look like on Capcom's RE engine, which is short for Reach for the Moon, not Resident Evil. And lo and behold, here we are with Monster Hunter Wilds. In terms of art style and gameplay mechanics, it's more of a sequel to Monster Hunter World, which makes sense given how this was developed by the same team. And I'm just gonna say this right now, if you've never played Monster Hunter, this is the best new starting point for the series. The game explains the basics so much better than any previous game, and since it's the newest entry in the series, the player base for this one is massive currently. So if you've ever been curious about getting into Monster Hunter, get this one right now. There are 4 aspects to this game that I want to talk about in this video: the interconnected world, the combat and monsters, the overall performance, and a bit of the story near the end too. And I want to preface this by saying that while I have a lot to critique, I do really like this game. This is the first Monster Hunter to feature conjoined areas with tons of dynamic weather effects and whatnot. I would call Monster Hunter Wilds an open world game, except that it's not an open world game. There are many areas you can freely travel to that are all interlinked, but I rarely ever did this since you can just warp to whatever region you want to on the fly. And the only reason you need to use these spots was for story reasons. The devs really wanted to make a constantly changing environment where monsters were coming and going all the time, and even some dynamic weather changes too. Which is nice and all, until you realize the weather causes major performance issues with the game. I really like the freedom to start a quest at any time from the map menu, and being able to save these as investigations, which made the post-game grind all the more fun to hunt and farm. They even simplified making subcamps in this game. To put it simply, you can find certain spots on the map and report back to your base to spend points to build subcamps, which are nice to have if you run out of a certain item or need a quick meal. But since monsters can find your camps and destroy them, I rarely felt the need to make new camps. Since the new mode of transportation, the Secret, made traveling much faster. Side note, the Secret was very jank at times, since the default controls were cumbersome to learn. And it took me a hot minute to figure out why I was going into a submenu every time I rode one. Quick tip, if you want to make the Secret controls better, go to Controls, scroll down to Secret Manual Controls, and swap them to Type 2. Something about Secret Manual Controls seems really weird to me for some reason. And now onto the combat, and here's where things start to get more positive for me. The best part of the game, in my opinion, is the combat. The improvements that they've made for Monster Hunter World is staggering. In fact, it makes going back to World kind of difficult, I won't lie. Since you now have the new focus mode, this thing is a godsend. Previous Monster Hunters have had an emphasis on positioning and learning a monster's moveset to figure out where and when best to strike. Wilds has all of this, but thanks to the new focus mode, you can better aim your attacks to maximum potential. And using focus mode lets you spot wounds that you can then use the focus strike move to tackle them to the ground. And knocking down a foe after slashing up a wound feels very rewarding, especially since you get extra monster parts too. Monster mounting is also back, and is much easier to do compared to World, especially when you're a Swaxbane like me and drive that thing in their head and blow them up. Now, there aren't any new weapons to speak of in this one, but the game heavily encourages you to have at least 2 weapons equipped at a time. And while I appreciate this, the game never really asks you to swap to a different one on hunts. And it only becomes less relevant in the end game when you start using decorations for your weapon. And having a hammer equipped for my switch axe build wasn't ideal, so I just ended up grabbing a second switch axe to make things easier. And this is the part where I tell you which weapons I stuck with most in Wilds, that being the switch axe. My early impressions of this weapon from the beta were not favorable. It felt too slow and didn't do a lot of damage. Thankfully, Capcom listened and gave it several buffs for the full release. Now the Swax feels more satisfying to build up sword mode and slash around in axe mode. There's also a new counter in sword mode that's fast and can deal some good damage to boot. It took me a bit to figure it out, but when I did, I began to unlock the full potential of this weapon. Another change to this weapon is in the form of the zero-sum discharge move. In Wilds, you need to hold down both attack buttons to mount the monster and blow him up. In previous games, you press 3 buttons to discharge, but now you need to hold down both attack buttons and have sword mode fully amped to do so. which took me a bit to figure out. In fact, I almost thought it wasn't in the game for a while, but once I did, everything around me exploded. And finally, the release slash I found to be okay, honestly. After doing an unmounted discharge, you're able to do another hit and spend more meters to do some extra damage. And while it does look pretty cool, it took too long to get this move out for me. Though I guess the optimal thing isn't to charge it down all the way. Needless to say, Switch Axe is my favorite weapon in Wilds, and reminded me of my first time playing World and learning the weapon from that game. But my favorite weapon throughout every Monster Hunter has always been the hammer. And I'll just sum up my thoughts on the Wilds version. I miss my Power Charge, Tails. I miss it a lot. For those unaware, Power Charge was introduced in World, which lets you do more KO damage and do a final Big Bang move when fully charged. And I always preferred this over the basic 2-hit bonk move when charged in other games. So you can imagine my disappointment when I found out the Power Charge is missing in Wilds. Sure, there's a new Money Charge move, which is very fun to do, I know, but my gosh, dude, this weapon feels off without Power Charge. In World and Rise, if I'm rocking Hammer, I'm always in Power Charge mode. And I don't know about you all, but I've never found the 2-hit bonk move satisfying at all. Aside from that, everything else about the hammer felt pretty good. The Big Bang was still really fun, though in this one, you can do the Mighty Swing now instead of doing the final Big Bang move if you want to. This weapon still feels very rewarding and satisfying to bonk with, but without Power Charge, it felt like an inferior version compared to the previous games, which is never what you want to see. Anywho, it's time to give you my thoughts on the monster roster. And as of this recording, there are 29 of them in the game. So I'm only going to be comparing the launch roster of previous entries, but the base roster is alright. There's a few surprises to be found here, some old monsters that haven't been seen since the PS2 era, but the roster is mainly comprised of new ones. And I think they did a pretty good job balancing old and new monsters with this one. Especially with the power of modern hardware, where we can now have more octopus-like creatures with new Udra and Shu Wu. Some of my new favorite monsters include the Chotacabra, who was a wimp before Anchor Arms, now he's a jerk and everybody loves him. Uthduna was a pretty cool one too, especially when you make it to the final arena and get this nice zoomed out shot of the secret running atop this long cliff. The previously mentioned new Udra was very fun too, since you can cut off all of its tails, and it's an oil-drenched monster that scorches the arena in flames. They couldn't do this on the PS2, let me tell you. But my new favorite monster has to be the Rei Dao, a flying wyvern with golden scales that zaps you and makes crazy sounds during the fight. Also, he has a rail cannon. That is freaking awesome. Other than that, the new flagship monster, Arkville, is a solid choice. With his chain attack like wings that whips around the arena, the fight is always a ton of fun to return to. He also gets some of the best gear in the game, and I would say he's a better flagship monster than even Magnum Mala was. Then again, nothing will ever come close to Nergigante. And now let's talk about what everyone and their mother has been hearing about with this game, that being the performance. For my playthrough, I played the PC version of Wilds, and unless you're someone who has a more modern PC, save yourself the trouble and get this on console. Since crossplay is now a thing, letting you play with all your friends on whatever system you own. The PC version took a good weekend to better optimize because I was running this thing at like 40 to 50 FPS. And it was very taxing on my PC natively, so I feel for any and all VTubers to stream with a 3D model. But since I'm a PNG tuber, I didn't have this issue. The PC port heavily encourages FrameGen for better performance, which, for those you don't know, is powered by AI to artificially boost FPS in PC games. And this was the only way I could get a rock solid 60 FPS from the game. But thankfully, I did find a way to make my game run better without it being a resource hog. I already talked about frame generation, but for upscaling, I used the AMD FSR 3 option to make the game look even better. And because of the frame gen, I lowered the custom frame rate setting to 30, so that way it would automatically boost to a rock solid 60. But what really cemented the fixes for me was the RA Framework mod, which better improved the stability of the game. And I have a link for it in the description if you're curious. Trust me, this thing makes the PC port run much better. Okay, so while I was writing the script, I almost forgot to talk about my thoughts on the story, so here we go. Here's Jude thoughts on story. Well, it's better than Monster Hunter World Story, I guess. Listen, Capcom, I appreciate you trying to make people care about the story to reach out to a wider audience, but I do not care about this game's story at all. I'm here to kill monsters guilt-free. There's a lot of walking sections to try and immerse yourself in the world, and I found myself bored browsing Twitter while this little kid named Natsa was yapping about how he's just like Arkville for real. He gets the majority of the focus, and I found him to be tolerable until near the end, where he has the hottest of hot takes out of complete nowhere. Then again, he's nowhere near as annoying as the handler from Monster Hunter World. At least you can skip the cutscenes, Monster Hunter World looking at you. And his whole reason for being in the final boss gets rendered null and void when our player character makes the best discovery since the invention of chocolate.
I suggest, huh?
I figured it out. We just need to hit them really, really hard.
So those are my thoughts on Monster Hunter Wilds. If I was to rank this from the ones I've played, I'd say I like Base Wilds more than Base World. While I'm not fully set if this is my game of the year for 2025, I'm very happy with my time so far in Wilds. But I'm sure it'll become game of the year when the title updates drop. And I'm very excited to see where they go with the game post-launch. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and hope you have a blessed day. Take care.